Hello, my name is Taylor Ackley, and I've been having a lot of my mandolin students ask me about double stops and how you can keep track of all the double stops that are possible on the mandolin. And that's a task that can be really overwhelming. There's a lot of notes on this thing, and there's a lot of music theory involved in understanding what double stops you can put where, how they connect to chords. And so there's lots of different ways to understand double stops. Probably the most straightforward is just to build up your grasp of music theory to where you know what notes are in each chord and how each chord fits into each key. Right? So, for example, the chord progression that I was just playing over right there, it's a fairly standard one. You hear it in a lot of fiddle tunes, bluegrass numbers, country songs, all sorts of things. It's 1, 4, 1, 5, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. Since I'm in the key of A, the 1 is an A chord, the 4 is a D chord, and the 5 is an E chord. So the way that I tend to think about double stops is to connect them as specific shapes within specific chord progressions. So what I mean by that is that if I take a progression like the one we just played, and I just find a shape on the mandolin that gives me a double stop within that first chord, I can then build double stops for the other two chords with good voice leading off of this same shape. So here's my A, here's my D, back to A, and there's my E. And doing it this way, thinking in terms of shapes and chord progressions, can get us moving around the mandolin without having to calculate every single double stop that we're working with. Because that will really slow you down, especially if you're playing a fast tempo. So, I'm going to walk you through that little exercise that I played at the beginning of this lesson. So, the whole thing is just based off of playing sets of double stops over the same chord progression. And I think of double stops in 5 basic sets, at least in terms of the double stops that you have in the chord tones of major chords within a given key. So, the first 3 sets are based off of the chop chord. The first one is based off of these 2 notes. The second is based off of the middle 2 notes of the chop chord. And the third one is based off of the top 2 notes of your A chop chord, or whatever chop chord you're working with. So for each of those double stops within that chop chord, we can build a 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. So I'm going to walk you through each of those for these 3 sets. The first one, what I think of as set 1, is built on an E and an A double stop on your G and D string. So there's your 1. And if you just put the note 2 frets above that E, you get F sharp. And that F sharp and A are parts of the D major chord. So if you're playing in the key of A and you're moving back and forth between A and D, really easy. Then finally, for the 5 chord, I keep the E on the G string and I slide down a half a step to the G sharp on the D string. and that gives me an E and a G sharp, which are notes in the E major chord. So here's my first set. A, D, A, E, A. I can do the same thing off of set 2. So that's on frets 7 and 4. It's an A note on my D string and a C sharp note on my A string. For my 1, I play those 2 notes. I move the C sharp on the A string up to a D on the A string and hold that A on my D string. And that gives me a D double stop. Then for E, I shift down a half step on the D string to a G sharp and hit the B on the A string. So that sounds like this. A, D, A, E, A. Then finally, my third set is built off of those top 2 notes of the chop chord. You could also think of that as the 2 notes of your standard open string G chord. But we'll go back to A. This one I find a little trickier. I don't use it as much, but it's good to know. So I play the C sharp on the A string, the A on the E string. Then for my D chord, I once again shift up that C sharp to a D, and then I go to the F sharp on the E string. So okay. Then for the E chord, I once again hit an E and a G sharp, but this time the E is on the 7th fret of the A string and the G sharp is on the 4th fret of the E string. So if I put all those together, those are the 3 double stop sets that have the root of the 1 chord in them. So by that I mean here we have the 5th of the 1 chord, the E, and the root, the A. Here we have the root A and the 3rd, and finally we have the 3rd and the A on top. So, but we also have 2 sets of double stops that can be built off of that A chord that don't have the root in them. So I think of these as sets 4 and 5. And to find those, I go to set 2 and set 3 and just slide them up by a 3rd while staying in the key. So this is actually a sound you hear a lot on the mandolin. Right, you hear that? All sorts of little chromatic things you can do in there. But here, I'm on the 11th fret of my D string. I'm playing a C sharp and then an E on the A string. And then to get to my D double stop in this shape, I slide up a half step to the octave D on the D string and hit that F sharp way up high on the 9th fret of the A string. Slide back down to the A. And then for the E, we get a familiar shape, a B on the D string and an E on the A string. So we've seen that here. So, little bit more explanation on that. This A and C sharp is a 3rd, right? It's a major 3rd. And we can keep playing a 3rd, but just play the next third up within the chord, which is going to give us a C sharp and an E. And that's set 4. And we can do the same basic thing with this C sharp and A. Really great little set of double stops there. You hear that all the time on the mandolin. So all I'm doing to get up there, I'm hitting A and C sharp, sliding up to E and C sharp, right? Same thing, C sharp, E, E, C sharp. Then I'm going to voice lead that up to F sharp and D on the 9th fret of the A string and the 10th fret of the E string, back down to my A, and then I'm going to hit a G sharp on the 11th fret of the A string and a B on the 7th fret of the E string. So that sounds like this. So, that's each one of the 5 sets of major chord 1, 4, 5 double stops that you can use on the mandolin. And if you string them together in order of range, we get 1, set 2, set 4, set 3, and set 5. So I can play that whole exercise in each one of these 5 sets. So I'm going to use that same progression, 1, 4, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. Then repeat it, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. The great thing about that little exercise is it gets us playing pretty much all of the standard double stops for major chords that are found on the mandolin. And so once you get that down, you can start taking those same shapes and put them in other places on the mandolin. So you can take set 3, and rather than having it on your 2 highest strings, you can have it on your lowest strings. And that can actually be a really great way if you're playing with a second mandolinist. If one of you comps these double stops as opposed to the full chop chords, it can be a nice sound. Right? So you can work on each of these sets anywhere on the mandolin in the key of A. And then, of course, you can put them in any other key. So, for example, one of my favorite things to do is to take set number 1 and put them on a C chord. So that's going to put me on frets 5 on the D string and 3 on the A string, giving me a G and a C. lots that I can do there. Any one of these sets, all you have to do is find the shape with the root in the right place. So you can find a fourth with the root on the top, you can find a third with the root on the bottom, or you can find a sixth with the root on the top, and then build your double stop sets off of that. So it can be a really great way, playing this exercise, to get to know the double stops on the mandolin, and then you can figure out all sorts of places to put them. These shapes, because the mandolin is symmetrical, work wherever you put them, and that's part of what's so great about this exercise. Hopefully this is helpful to some of you. Hope you enjoy it, and if you like what you're hearing here, I might try and do some more of these lessons. If you want to check out some of my music and hear me play, you can follow Taylor Ackley and the Deep Roots Ensemble on our Facebook page or on Instagram, or you can check out Taylor Ackley on YouTube, where I have a channel that has lots of great performance videos, lots of mandolin playing, singing, and other great stuff. Hope everybody has a great day and have a fun time playing the mandolin.